astonishing how, like, the Western journalists keep siding with criminals at every opportunity they have, even when they're in another country. Like, I genuinely do not understand it. So, for those of you who don't know, El Salvador was considered to be a very dangerous place due to the high crime rate. I mean, it was one of the worst places with like a very high crime per capita due to the high number of gangs. And you have this guy, right, Nayib Bukele, and he basically says, if you elect me, I will solve the crime problem. And he gets elected, so he solves the crime problem. Now, granted, a lot of people said that there were human rights violations and that his methods were radical. But the problem was radical in nature as well. I mean, the crime rate was so phenomenally high that it shouldn't have ever gotten to this point. Like the previous governments should have cracked down on the crime and prevented from getting to this point. Because again, like, high levels of crime do not exist unless the law is either not applied or the politicians want it to exist. There's no other way. So he manages to fix the crime rate, and now the journalists are, oh, it's an unconstitutional victory. And I'm looking at this, and the only thing unconstitutional is that they don't like him. And I just don't understand, like, why is The Economist, you know, a Western paper that doesn't live in El Salvador, isn't affected by El Salvador, they don't like the president. Why, though? You know, I understand why I can criticize the United States, for instance, because even though I live in Romania, what happens in the United States affects Europe, and therefore it affects Romania as well. A lot of the culture from the United States comes into Europe and then goes into Romania. Right? So, like, criticizing American culture is fine because, like, America tries to influence the international scale, so it's fine if the international scale has some criticism in return. But, like, what does El Salvador do to you? Like, the reason that I don't really talk about, you know, the policies that happen in Myanmar or that happen in El Salvador isn't because, like, I don't think these places are important. I'm pretty sure they are, but it doesn't affect me. And ironically, right? And I'm pretty sure, like, the people in El Salvador talk about El Salvador, but they don't talk about Romania because Romania doesn't affect them, right? So why is it that you have, like, these Western journalists talking about El Salvador? Like, how does it affect them? And I think, like, the reason that it affects them is that they're looking at certain places in America, like California or New York, and they're worried that at some point, some politician can come out and say, you know what, this crime level, enough. And they're going to get elected. And, you know, like, the left says, oh, well, the criminal is a victim of society. Well, maybe it's time for society to victimize him harder. Maybe it's time for society to arrest him. Because Joe Biden had a very popular speech when he was younger, and he basically explained that when a criminal wants to mug you, or your family, or your wife, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, like, when you're in the situation where a criminal is about to rob you, at that point, you don't really care if society was nice to him, if his mother didn't love him, if maybe, you know, when he was born, his favorite blankie was torn. You are under the tyranny of the criminal. And at that point, you know, the government has failed you. Because you're paying taxes so that the government makes sure that you don't get mugged. And it is possible, by the way. Like in Romania, for instance, we don't have people leaving their car doors open so that people don't break in. Like, that thing just doesn't happen here. It used to be bad. Like, we used to have crime rate, but we fixed it. We got rid of communism. Communism went away, crime rate went down. So it is possible, like, you don't have to live like that. And apparently this guy, Nayib Bukele, which I don't know much about, but it has shown the people from Salvador that it is true, they don't have to live like that. And he got re-elected with 85% of the vote. Now, I haven't heard any type of complaints that, you know, the elections didn't go as planned or that. No, you can't really steal 85% of the vote. I mean, this is ridiculously high. So they're complaining that it's an unconstitutional victory. It's like, I'm sorry, if 85% of the people in a country want something, they will fucking get it. With 85% of the vote, you can change the Constitution. Like, even in the United States, unironically, if the Democrats won 85% of the vote, They could remove the First Amendment, they could remove the Second Amendment. I mean, at that point, you can probably change the entire thing. If you have like 85% of people, there's nothing you can do at that point. It's an overwhelming majority, right? It's not a 50% plus one. 85%. I mean, if you do not give 85% of people what they want, they will take it by force at that point. There's nothing to stop them. 85%, that's insane. It's like 3 out of 4 people. Am I right? Did my math check? I think it checks out. Probably a little bit more, right? Like 3.2%? Whatever. So, the reason they say it's unconstitutional is because apparently he has indeed won a landslide victory. See, even the journalists have to agree. Yeah, he did win the landslide victory. But the reason is that the rule of law noted that it was unconstitutional for him to run a second consecutive term. But in 2021, he got the top court to rule that he could run again if he took a 6-month leave of absence. Dude, if the top court rules something, then it's not fucking constitutional. It's like, imagine this in America. If the Supreme Court of the United States rules something, then it is constitutional, by definition. It doesn't matter how much you whine, how much you complain. Legally speaking, if the Supreme Court rules something, it becomes constitutional. They're complaining that, he only took the leave of absence on paper, but in reality, he didn't. Well, if the Supreme Court punishes him for it, fine, whatever. But again, at the end of the day, he got 85% of the vote. If he won with like 51%, sure, you could have these conversations. 85%, Jesus. So apparently the immaculately coiffed, gens-clad leader is popular largely thanks to his crackdown on crime. Before he took office, Salvadorians lived in terror of gangsters who extorted money from local businesses with impunity and fought deadly turf wars with each other. He tried negotiating with the gangs and then switched to a iron fist approach. He let the police arrest anyone they suspected of gang ties, more than 74,000 people, equivalent to over 80% of the young male population. Few have had trials yet, though they may eventually get collective ones. No, I do agree, like, this is a human rights violation, right? But again, radical problems require radical solutions. Like, it shouldn't have gotten to this point. It shouldn't have gotten to the point where you have deadly turf wars. Is deadly turf wars with 8% of the male population? Is that preferable though? Think about it as it was like the worst turf war that the government won. With so many gangsters behind bars or in hiding, previously dangerous neighborhoods have become much safer. The national homicide rate has plunged. 51 per 100,000. Jesus fucking Christ. Can you imagine that? Worse than COVID, isn't it? What was the rate of COVID per 100,000 people? I think it was... I think the homicide rate in El Salvador is bigger. I need to check. I need to fact check on this, but I may not be wrong. A huge drain on the livelihoods, and ordinary folk can now walk the streets without fear. We lived through 50 horrible years of wars and killing, and everything has changed. And the press doesn't like him. Let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.